Today is Sunday, December 18th, 2016, and this is episode 180 of the Defensive Security Podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me tonight, as always, is Mr. Andrew Kellett.
Hey, Jerry, how are you? Long time no podcast.
I know it's been, 5 days, 4 days.
Yes. Well, we did the mashup, but we haven't had a Defensive Sec podcast in a couple weeks since.
That's true.
Life's been crazy busy, but glad we're here.
My house is finally back in order, so the Defensive Security Studio is mostly back in operation.
That's true. Well, when you go on vacation and people move in and turn it into a grow house, this is what happens.
That is true, and you got to shoo all the llamas out. Yep.
And then clean up all the llama party, remains.
Yeah, they can make a mess.
It's tough. But here we are.
So anyway, welcome back. Good to be back. Happy holidays to everyone.
Indeed. Happy Rana Hana Kwanzaa.
Yep.
I think that captures pretty much everything most people might celebrate this time of year who might listen to us.
That's right. So just a reminder before we get into the show that the thoughts and opinions we express are ours and do not represent those of our employers. So first up today, we have a story from bleepingcomputer.com. By the way, if you're not familiar with Bleeping Computer, it's kind of emerged as like the de facto place to talk about ransomware infections. So it's kind of an interesting site if you're not familiar with it. And the title here is New Scheme, Spread Popcorn Time Ransomware, Get a Chance of Free Decryption Key. And I mentioned this a little bit on that show, on the Mashup show. So you may or may not have heard of this before. But anyway, there's a strain of ransomware called Popcorn Time, which, by the way, is not to be confused with the illicit file sharing tool. It seems pretty standard fare, in terms of its operation, but where it goes a little sideways is that it offers would-be victims an alternative way to get your files back. So rather than paying the 1 Bitcoin ransom to get your files, you have an alternative, which is to send a customized link, which is basically an exploit kit with some tailored identifier tag to get back to you, so it can be attributed to you. And if you infect 2 of your friends and they end up paying the 1 Bitcoin ransom, then you get your files back, allegedly. Although you only have 6 days, I think, to complete the deal. So this is an interesting evolution in ransomware, in my view. And I really think we're going to continue to see what I'll call market innovation in the ransomware business, and
you might even say disruptive innovation.
Exactly, disruptive innovation in the business models.
I'm looking forward to Tim Ferriss's book on ransomware market disruption.
Crossing the ransomware chasm. Yes.
Inside the malware tornado.
Oh boy. So yeah, there's, I guess not a ton of from a malware perspective innovation in this, but it's really I think the business model that's kind of concerning to me, and I think we're starting to see the ransomware purveyors getting creative. And, again, this probably from a business context isn't incredibly material, but I'm calling it a harbinger of things to come. And, again, put your helmet on because things are getting bad.
You know what else is interesting that I found on this one was when you have been encrypted and they pop up the whole warning message and tell you about what's going on and they tell you what you have to do and how long you have to do it. One thing that I found really interesting is why, quoting from their pop-up, why we do that. We are a group of computer science students from Syria. As you probably know, Syria is having a bad time for the last 5 years. Blah, blah, blah. Lots of people died. Personally lost a bunch of people myself. The sad part of this war is that all parts keep fighting, but eventually we, the poor and simple people, suffer, watching our family, friends die every day. Be perfectly sure that all the money that we get goes to food, medicine, and shelter to our people. We are extremely sorry that we're forcing you to pay, but that's the only way we can keep living. Now, whether or not that's actually true, I'm gonna say it's probably not true. First off, but it's an interesting psychological angle.
Yeah.
Right. So you're a good person. You want to help, and you're like, well, this is terrible, but hey, at least the Bitcoin is going to a good cause.
Feels more like a donation, right?
Right. Which is another interesting sort of psychological aspect of this, as opposed to just fueling some Eastern European crime syndicate, which is probably more likely to be the case. But so yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting about this one.
Yeah, very interesting. I do think at some point, some charity, some legitimate charity may actually, or pseudo-legitimate charity, may start using ransomware as a means of funding itself.
kind of the old like NASA at home, SETI at home sort of thing. But
yeah, exactly.
So the Red Cross sponsored ransomware,
right?
The Salvation Ransom Army.
Think of it as like a Robin Hood type thing, right?
Well, yes, but that's a common misnomer. Robin Hood didn't rob from the rich and give to the poor. He robbed from the government and gave back to the people that the government robbed from.
Whatever.
Don't fall into this populist dogma.
Don't ruin my vision.
You picked the wrong co-host for that, buddy.
Don't mess with me. All right. So moving on to our next story comes from Ars Technica, and the title is "Disgraced IT Worker Stole Confidential Expedia Emails After He Left." Holy cow! This story is just amazing.
Yeah, and they kind of almost bury the lead.
Yeah. So this person Jonathan Lai, I guess it's Lai or Lee, in San Francisco, worked for Expedia from I guess 2013 through 2015, or at least this is when he was perpetrating the scheme. He was monitoring the email, reading the emails of the CFO and I guess the head of investor relations and other high-ranking employees.
Let's be clear, because the title is misleading.
Oh yes.
While he worked there, while he was employed as an admin, as an IT specialist, he was reading these high-level people's emails. Yes,
correct.
Not after. So it starts with the comment of that he, kept reading emails after he left, but this was while he was there. He was reading.
Correct. While he was there, he was employed. He started the scheme. I'm not exactly sure when he started working at Expedia, but he started this scheme in 2013, where he was reading the email of the CFO, the head of investor relations, and other high-ranking employees. And he continued doing that through October 2015. However, he left the company in April of 2015. And one might ask, how was he able to do that? And the answer is that they didn't take his laptop back, and they didn't deactivate his IDs.
After, by the way, he was already sort of, doing all this insider trading.
Oopsie. So anyway, what apparently he had been doing was monitoring these people's email, because I guess in his capacity as an IT person, he must have been some sort of an administrator. That doesn't say what his job function was, but you can kind of extrapolate that he had some kind of privileged access to their email system of some nature, and which leads me to believe that maybe he was a sysadmin type person. Anyway, he was getting had early copies of profit or the SEC filings, the quarterly reports and
other press releases that
yeah,
were going to go out.
right. And he was trading that. So he would sell if something was looking bad. He would sell before the news came out. If it was going to be good, he would buy it.
Of course, the SEC has never seen this scheme before. No,
never.
Right. And they couldn't possibly clue into that. Oh yeah, he got caught.
So apparently though, he even with that information, he wasn't, I guess, very good, because he only made $331,000 over the course of 2 years. I don't know. Maybe he didn't have a lot of money to trade with. I don't know, or didn't know about options. Who knows? Anyway, he pled guilty to securities fraud and agreed to pay back $375,000, which is the $331,000 plus interest. But also apparently he still remains to be charged by the SEC for the actual insider trading. So. More to come on that angle, but I think the thing that resonated with me about this particular story, I guess there's a couple things. One is we often, and this is just my view, and I've talked about this on the show in the past. We often think about the threat actors as our user population and the external people. We often don't think of the threat actors as our own IT department, and that's especially when you are in a regulated industry or a large publicly traded company. It is a potential problem. We are starting to see.
But is that a pocket case? I mean, if we take a look at like Verizon data breach reports and other data breach reports, the vast majority of actual found breaches are typically externally initiated. So, if we look at the 80-20 rule, we've got limited resources to deploy. I'm not saying we ignore it, but I'm saying are we outsizing the risk?
Possibly so. The one thing that I'll say is, I'm not confident that we really understand how big the risk is. Because if you have valid access, to the data, the only way that it's going to become recognized that something bad happened generally is through something like this, right? Where you get caught. I suspect people are reading email that they shouldn't be reading all the damn time in many companies, and it's for the most part a benign thing. But I know that, for instance, the banking regulators here in the U.S. are pretty strict on the concept of administrator access and monitoring administrative access and controlling it, and for good reason. But you're right. I think if you were to line it up, it's not as pressing a problem as a lot of other things. But having said that, though, again, a lot of these attacks are kind of a graph theory type deal, where just because it wasn't the administrator, right? I mean, look at oh boy, I guess I can't even name some names here, right? But there have been many companies in the past who have been breached by their administrators, their sysadmins, being compromised, right? And
right.
so
yeah.
That becomes
they unwittingly become insider threats. Yes,
correct,
absolutely.
Correct.
But in this case, they could have saved themselves a lot of pain just by having an accurate and useful termination policy to actually shut down accounts and turn off VPNs. I don't know. Call me crazy.
Now that part just completely blows my mind. I mean, I can understand a smaller company, right? I really am having a hard time getting my head around this happening at a company like Experian. I mean, not Experian, Expedia. Sorry, Experian. Yeah, it just doesn't seem like something that would happen there. This is a very, very basic thing. And there's really, by the way, there's two dimensions this could have been caught on, right? Terminate his IDs,
Yep.
and get his laptop back.
Right.
And apparently that they failed on both parts.
Well.
So, but again, coming on that point, that's just basics, right? I mean, there's nothing sophisticated about that.
No. And one might argue that perhaps the controls to spot the insider trading worked. The SEC caught him and investigated and prosecuted him, or is prosecuting them.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, they have I'm told, fairly sophisticated algorithms to spot this sort of behavior. But who knows? We'll see.
Possibly so, yeah.
I do appreciate the stock art on this one of just, the handcuffs. That's good. And,
yeah, they went all out on that.
It's slightly better than the hacksaw and the hoodie over a laptop.
Yeah, standing up, typing on the laptop, yeah.
Right,
awesome.
Right.
All right, our next story also comes from Ars Technica, and the title is Millions Exposed to Malvertising That Hid Attack Code in Banner Pixels.
This one's pretty interesting, fairly sophisticated.
Yeah. So apparently this has been going on for quite some time. But what's happened in very recent months is that apparently these actors have moved on to some really major advertising or online advertising companies. They don't say which ones, but here's the deal. So many of the online advertising companies inspect the ads looking for malicious code, and as they should. But what this group has found, and they're calling this attack group Stegano, as in steganography. But the way the attack works is that the banner ad is a JPEG. And the attackers have encoded into the alpha channel of the JPEG the actual quote payload of the malware, which basically is a dropper, right? Let's not be overly dramatic. It just reaches out and pulls down some malware if you're running Internet Explorer. But basically, the JavaScript that runs, which looks to the banner ad companies, is benign, right? What it does is it actually groks the image, it pulls out the data in the alpha channel, does some massaging on it, and that actually is a script which goes and pulls down some malware from a couple of websites, and it's kind of interesting. What it does is it formulates a response back to the command and control server with a bunch of data that's embedded in it, including what operating system you're running, what browser you're using, and a bunch of other stuff to detect or to tell it what kind of payload to push down to you as part of the chain of events. But this is a really interesting.
All of this to potentially hide from researchers.
Correct. Right.
Yeah. So it's trying to figure out, are you likely to be a sophisticated user that might understand what's going on and therefore expose them and shut them down?
Right.
So it looks at all sorts of things like virtual machines and all sorts of stuff to figure out, do you just get the normal happy banner or do you get the malicious banner?
Good point. That's right.
Huh?
That's right. And all that stuff is again hidden in the image.
I could be naive in this statement, but I still am puzzled why we can't just say, look, no more dynamic content in ads. Why do you need JavaScript? Why do you need any of this? Why can't it just be static? And I get that that's not sophisticated enough for most ad companies, right? They want to be able to do profiling and user tracking and behavior and cookies and all that kind of jazz. But man,
that's exactly the problem.
Yeah, I mean, personally, this is one reason why I absolutely insist on running an ad blocker. Much to the chagrin of certain sites like Business Insider or Forbes and others that yell at me because I'm stealing food from baby mouths.
Or Forbes in particular, yes.
Yeah, but until we stop seeing ads being a vector for malicious content, I can't in good conscience not run an ad blocker.
Oh, I agree, and I just don't think we can get there in the way with the way things are currently designed. I'm just not confident that there is a good way to get there. I think the end game here is that websites are going to have to find some other source of revenue.
Probably ransomware.
See, there you go. That's innovation right there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the sites should cut out the middleman,
right,
and just push down the ransomware themselves.
Maybe different sites could bid for the least amount they're willing to take to give you, ransomware.
Ooh, that's a now you're talking. Like could be a whole market.
It's true. This could be the next version of Obamacare.
Wow.
I know. Came up with right here on this show.
Make the internet great again.
So back to the story. One thing I found interesting was the initial sort of profile code apparently was its own vulnerability. That the script that ran in the Pixel, if this has been going on since 2014, it was a vulnerability in IE that allowed them to gather all this information that wasn't patched until late 2016.
Right.
So are they potentially burning an O-Day for 2 years and nobody caught it? And then the full exploit was actually if it could figure out you're running a vulnerable version of Flash. So it doesn't seem to indicate to me they were burning an O-Day on Flash, but Flash has 30 critical remote exploits every month patched. So, that's not hard to come by, and people are bad about keeping Flash up to date. But it's interesting if they were running an O-Day against IE for all that time.
Yeah, the way I read that is I don't think that the attackers thought of that as an O-Day. I think they just found a way to get some information out that probably shouldn't have been leaked.
Functionality that
right.
wasn't necessarily not a true kind of remote code exploit kind of thing. Like we think of it just hey, if you query this in IE, it'll tell you that kind of thing.
Yeah, it was an information leakage. Vulnerability, right?
And Microsoft just turned that off. But yeah, that's a good point.
So anyway, but I think the point is that all that does is it make it harder for the attackers to avoid the researchers.
It's true,
because that all that code was doing was looking for evidence of virtual machines and things like that. So
so I wonder if that would also dodge things like sandboxing technologies like FireEye and others. Interesting stuff. I did note here, by the way, too, that the Flash vulnerabilities that they talked about, one was from late 2015, and then one from early 2016, and then middle 2016. So again, it could be they were using some unknown vulnerabilities in Flash for a while, but who knows? This could be just when it could have been updated over time to different vulnerabilities in Flash. This is when this particular version of the code got sampled.
Yeah, that'd be my guess. The other thing to your question about whether something like FireEye would profile it, I suspect that FireEye would not profile the interpretation of the image, right? But what it would profile is when it pulled the code out and tried to go do something and then pulled some files down. I think that's where it would it would probably get caught, which makes me wonder if there isn't a future opportunity to embed the entire malware into the image somehow.
Mm-hmm.
That's I guess for future exploration, I suppose. But yeah, I think that the net is, man, ad blockers. Like just it's I understand.
Sucks.
I understand that we talk about the hierarchy of threats, and this is maybe not the most pressing one, but there's a simple solution. You just install an ad blocker and then move on.
Right. And hopefully it's a decent ad blocker that runs well and
not
doesn't get paid.
Not AdBlock Plus, by the way. Yes.
Yeah, which I'm still using, but I probably should switch off it because now certain websites are paying them to not
Well, they're
block
their
their
own.
ads.
Yeah, they're their own ad network now.
Yeah,
Which
is interesting.
ironic.
And the problem with that is, they say, well, we only allow clean malicious sites or non-malicious sites. But when you've got something like this going on that's being targeted against very well-known good sites, how can you trust that?
Well, you can't.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the point. I think if you were to go to, Google or any of the others, they would probably tell you that they only allow reputable sites too.
Yep.
So anyway, moving on to our next story, which is a follow-up. And this comes from Reuters, and the title is Exclusive. Some Bangladesh bank officials involved in heist, according to an investigator.
Shocker.
I know. Can you believe it? So there apparently are 5 bank officials. Really, they haven't said who they are or what positions they had. But 5 bank officials were guilty of negligence and were the unwitting accomplices of foreign people who were apparently manipulating them, allegedly, to weaken security of the bank's connection to the SWIFT network. There's really no details about what actually that meant, although we do know some things from the past, like they used really old router and it was connected to their network, and in hindsight, I do wonder. Maybe some of those things that had come out earlier are not so accidental, I guess. So, anyhow,
well, accidental with intent or accidental out of convenience?
Within someone's intent.
Right, but I guess what I'm saying is that really weak internal security may not have been the original plan. It just was easily exploited by insiders.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Right. So more, we may see more. It's not clear to me if we'll get to see the outcome of whatever charges are filed here. But this is continuing to turn into a quite a story. So if anything new develops, we will cover that too. All right, moving on to our next story, which comes from Motherboard, which is the Vice.com technology site. The title here is newly uncovered site suggests NSA exploits for direct sale. So that we all recall the shadow brokers, I think, right? The shadow brokers, I guess it was about 5 or 6 months ago, released a bunch of files which ended up containing actual 0 days for things like Cisco and other firewalls. And that was allegedly just a sampling of a much bigger pot of NSA tools, which there's a lot of debate on the source of those. However, at the time, or shortly after the initial drop, the shadow brokers had requested, I think it was $100 million in Bitcoin.
It was non-trivial amount of money
for the whole kit and caboodle. But now, someone named Bocephus Cletus has gotten on the internet and published a diatribe of sorts, saying that in terrible Southern drawl, that the shadow brokers are now offering all of their I guess previously unreleased implants on a la carte menu for between 1 and 100 Bitcoins. And they only, by the way, reference them by code name, which, given what we saw from the Edward Snowden leaks, the names do kind of look like NSA namey, like
NSA namey
things like Enemy Run and Egg Basket.
some of the hot boys names of 2017 is what I'm seeing.
Yeah, Damp Crowd.
Oh yeah, that one's going to be big.
Elated Monkey.
That's actually the name of my Elvis Costello cover band.
Really?
Yeah, believe it or not.
Awesome.
Mhm.
That's crazy. So anyway, point here is they do appear to be based on some PGP signatures that it does appear to be sourced from the same group that originally released the first batch of files, at least according to Motherboard. There was some discussion up to now that this person named Hal Martin in the U.S., who was another NSA contractor, by the way, who, apparently, I think he was the one had been amassing data for 20 years, if memory serves, and it had like terabytes of stuff. And so
never know. You never know when you might need it.
Well, I suspect that he just was backing things up, and he was probably really worried about ransomware. And I think
that's brilliant.
He was just trying to keep an offsite backup. Anyway, it worked out really badly for him, and so now he's
this time, maybe not next time. Maybe next time he fixes the ransomware.
That's true. Maybe the reason this all went wrong is that the NSA did get some ransomware, and they were trying to find a backup, and somebody said, "Oh, that guy Hal Martin has a backup," and Hal wouldn't give it to him. So anyway,
you could be right. I think this joke is dying.
It is dying terribly. But anyway, Hal, in recent times, has been alleged to be the source of the Shadow Broker stuff. There's been a lot of different, a lot of different debates and speculation on where it came from. One of the most common or most popular speculations was that somebody actually found this NSA toolkit on a server that the NSA had been using to run some attacks, and then they didn't properly clean it up. But again, there's really nothing set in. There's no confirmed source. But
it's setting the market for leaked NSA tools. We're finding what the market actually is.
Well, that's true. But here's my concern, right? There's a whole bunch of these. I don't know exactly the number. I don't think it really says how many there are. But if it's anything like what we saw before, they probably are legitimate. I mean, in fact, they actually exist. They probably are legitimate. And I'll tell you what, if these get out into the world, we're going to have some. We who are responsible for patching crap and securing crap are going to have some tough days ahead.
Maybe. When this originally came out, we thought this was some really old code that was still in use, but not heavily in use.
Right.
Yeah. So.
But in the case of what was it, Fortinet and Cisco, they actually were still current. I mean, they worked.
Yeah, that's
current.
True. They originally had thought that it was like only a couple years old code, but then they revised it and said it was some current code.
Yep.
Yep.
Exactly. So watch out.
And if you want to look for a Christmas gift,
that's true.
Leaked NSA.
Yeah, makes a perfect gift.
It's better than having somebody name a star after you on the Star Registry, which is recorded in copyright form in the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and that makes it official. Sorry, I've heard that ad so many times lately. I'm like, oh, shut up. Holidays are not a good time for me and advertisers.
I can tell. Anyway, we've seen I would say a pretty significant trend over the past 2 years of organizations who are quote unquote stockpiling vulnerabilities and exploits getting compromised. We saw it with Hacking Team and the other French company and the NSA, and this stuff is apparently really hard to keep secret. So,
well, maybe. I mean, they could have thousands and thousands and thousands more that we don't know about.
well, they may very well, but
Yeah.
how many does it take to make us have a bad day?
Like they say, information wants to be free.
It does. All right, moving on to our final story, which, surprise, surprise, also comes from Ars Technica. And the title here is, What Can You Do with 1 Billion Yahoo Passwords? Lots of bad things.
Wait, did something happen with Yahoo?
A long time ago, yes.
Oh, poor Yahoo.
So,
At some point, you just want to go, oh, just put them out of their misery. Just put them down.
So you may recall that several months ago, we discussed a breach of 500 million records from Yahoo, right? And you may be inclined to think, well, maybe it wasn't 500 million, maybe it was 1 billion, but you would be wrong, right? So that breach of 500 million that we talked about apparently happened in 2014. This breach of 1 billion records happened in 2013. So it's a distinct breach, and apparently the way
that's 1 billion with a B.
With a B.
Wow.
Yeah, which by the way is like 1/7 of the population of the Earth, which tells me that there's a lot of fake accounts. or spammer. I mean, I can only assume that, probably 80% of those are bot created spam sending accounts.
Right. Yeah. Those are not all discrete individual humans.
Right.
Maybe it's the Ashley Madison bots trying to become self-aware.
Probably so. We want to be real. Anyway, it's unclear to me why one breach had 500 million records stolen and another one had 1 billion. That's not at all clear, but apparently it wasn't. By the way, it wasn't just email not email. It wasn't just user ID information. It was also code that was stolen at the time back in 2013.
And a bunch of personal identifiable information too.
Yes.
Oh, names, birth dates, personal details,
addresses,
security questions,
yep.
Phone numbers, MD5 hashed passwords, which, as we know, isn't fairly trivial to break.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I think that's the real story to me, is that Yahoo was not very mindful of security best practices. That, if you go in the mindset of assume that you'll be breached, you want to protect this sort of data, assuming the bad guys get a hold of it, and they took, in many ways, the minimum sort of appearance of security without really building much real security into this sort of stuff, which even in 2013 was common best practice. And we've talked about this a lot. There's always a trade-off in businesses. There's always limited resources, and how and where you deploy your resources is very difficult to decide. So I got to think that at some point somebody said, we could do this, and somebody else said, no, we're going to spend these resources in this way. Or, I'd like to believe that they didn't have just that naive of folks running this infrastructure.
Yeah, it's difficult to say for sure, but in addition to what you just mentioned, I think another key point in the story is that back after the breach of the 500 million was discovered, their investigation didn't uncover this 1 billion user breach.
That we know of.
That we know of, right? The way this apparently was discovered was somebody found the data for sale online. And I guess it was, I don't think it's mentioned in this story, but there's another story running around the internet that somebody apparently bought the $1 billion records for $300,000. So, we'll more to come on that, I'm sure. But and I guess another, the other part for me is there seems to be more and more time between when these breaches are happening and when we're finding out about them.
Now, are you saying that when we as the public find out about them, or
Yes.
when the corporations who are hacked find out about them?
Well, particularly when we as the public find out about them.
Yeah.
And so I guess the point is that in the wake of these breaches, what's always the, I mean, other than the credit monitoring, right? But what's always the guidance given? Go change your password.
Right.
Well, you needed to change your password, 2 years ago.
What and the theory behind that is, if you're reusing your password someplace else,
right?
Same username and password, which goes back to why we have said so many times in this show, you really probably should have a password manager of some type, like a LastPass or a OnePass or a KeyPass or whatever you like, and generate a unique randomized password for every single individual site. That's really your best defense against this sort of thing, because you cannot control how they store your passwords on the other end, but you can limit the damage.
Yeah, that's true. Although I will tell you, it is more complicated when someone has access to your email, because a lot of times your email can be used to recover passwords. If someone has unfettered access to your email, they can give you a bad day. And
indeed. Well, agreed. Although we are starting to see more things like some sort of two-factor based on SMS authentication. And before we get on the story about NIST saying it's no longer secure, that's
fine.
Just stop it. I could see it. I could see it in your eyes.
I wasn't going to go there.
Yeah, you were. I knew you were.
I wasn't going to go there.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, but that's something you can look at too, is two-factor auth on password resets. But you're right. If you can get somebody's email, you typically have got pretty good control, unless they've set up some additional security.
Yeah, and so they actually, in this article, they talk about this, the case of this lady named Alexandra Chalupa. Oh,
yeah, we're getting hate mail on that one.
Sorry, and she apparently worked for the DNC and was investigating the relationship between one of Donald Trump's campaign workers, or I think it's his campaign chairman, and someone from some Ukrainian politician, and allegedly was being dogged by someone who kept breaking into her Yahoo account, and even though she had been repeatedly changing the password. And it sounds like, from at least the insinuation in the article, is that some of the source code that was stolen enabled the attacker to create a what they call a cookie, magic cookie, which is a little scary that they apparently had that facility in the code. But
I'm sure it was for debugging. I'm sure it made perfect sense when they coded it.
But so if we rewind a while, we talked about Yahoo in the past, and I think it was Alex Stamos that left in protest. Remember this story?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, because somebody had modified the code to inject magic cookies, and the allegation
for the government.
Yeah, and the allegation was it was at the government's request, I don't know.
As we recall, the story is they bypassed the internal security team.
Right.
To do it.
So I guess. It is. I guess here's my question, right? And it's a rhetorical question because we don't know the answer. So, in this specific case of Alexandra Chalupa, was it the government who had implanted this magic cookie facility, or was what was this magic cookie facility that the government had requested put in, stolen by some outside actor and then used, like, right.
Which is everything we say about why backdoors for just law enforcement are a bad idea.
Right.
Because you cannot control it to be just for law enforcement.
Right. And it certainly seems like that's what's happened here.
Yeah, that somebody got to look at the code, figured out that there was this magic backdoor, perhaps included on request of the government, perhaps not, and they exploited it. In theory, right. There's a lot of conjecture here. Let's be very clear. We're extrapolating from the little details we have.
Yeah,
I'm sure there'll be a made-for-TV movie on FX at some point.
true. Yes, Quentin Tarantino movie.
No, because then all the Systems would shoot each other at the end, which is not very realistic.
Michael Bay car chases.
Right. All the monitors exploding as they go on starships and in Michael Bay movies.
Right. So, yeah, boy, I don't even know where to begin with this particular story. We talked in the past about the during the 500 million record breach issue. If you're sitting on 1 billion records of customer data, you kind of have a responsibility, at least in my view, to do a pretty good job of protecting it. And I'm not sure, just in hindsight, I'm not sure that's actually what happened here. But again, we don't know the means by which this data was stolen, right? I mean, it could have been a backup tape. It could have been, it could have been an insider. There's a lot of things we don't understand about how that happened. And I'm not sure, by the way, that they actually know.
Right.
Or if they do, they're certainly not saying. But in any event,
it's got to suck to be in the InfoSec team over there right now, though. Man, that's got to hurt.
Yeah, I had heard that Verizon, because their Yahoo, for those who don't recall, is in the process of being acquired by Verizon, and in the wake of the previous disclosed breach, Verizon, it was both that breach and then also the alleged cooperation with the government. Verizon actually was apparently reportedly going to pursue a 20% reduction in acquisition cost. I had heard some rumors that they were going to take another run in the wake of this one, but I guess the good news is, right, they probably don't have much more to lose.
I think that's some famous last words.
Well, I suppose all the records, all the users from 2013 through today, I suppose they could lose those. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
I don't have much useful. This is just a dumpster fire.
I think at some point we just have to say it is what it is and good luck.
Don't do this. Don't be Yahoo.
Right.
Don't be a Yahoo. All right. There you go. That's the story. That's the show. Thank you.
And on that cheery note, it's the holidays.
It's the holidays. Happy holidays, everyone. I hope. Seriously though, I hope you all have a great holiday season if this is what you celebrate, and we will certainly be talking again very soon. I'm hoping it won't be another 2 or 3 weeks until we talk again. I suspect, given that next Sunday is Christmas, we'll probably be a day or two delayed. So, again, a shout out to our Patreon donors. Thank you so much for your generosity.
Absolutely, thank you. You guys are awesome.
And thank you again for listening. And just to let you know, you can find all the links to the stories we talked about tonight on our website at www.defensivesecurity.org. You can follow the show on Twitter at DefensiveSec. You can follow Mr. Kellett on Twitter at Lurg. You can follow me on Twitter at MaliciousLink. Anything else you'd like to say?
No, just thanks everybody for listening as always. Have a happy holidays. Oh, don't forget, we do have a Slack channel that I am woefully bad at hanging out in. I need to get better at that. But thanks as always. Have a great week, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.